Welcome. What we're going to be looking at in this video is we're going to be looking at how you would use keywords and outcomes when you look at a question and when you interpret a question in order to answer it. We're going to actually look beyond the question and other elements which affected how you're going to respond to your essay. And namely, that is looking at broader studies outcomes and using keywords as part of your answer. So we're going to be on now just finding those keywords and looking at how you would actually use them as part of your answer. Okay, so first of all, outcomes should be your first consideration when answering a question. And if you have them, or if you don't have them, find them. Find out exactly what it is the question is expecting you to do, because it's not going to be stated in your answer or in your question what it is exactly you need to try and do in your work. What it will be shown through is your outcomes. It will give you an idea of what you're expected to do, as an outline, exactly what it is you're going to be marked on, where you're going to get your scores, so to speak, how you should go about developing it. And often you'll find keywords such as you're able to develop, maintain, and organize an argument. Immediately have a look at that and make sure that it says something like that. But even just have a broad look at the outcomes and just sort of see what it is you're going to be assessed on. They will give you a guideline for what it is exactly you're going to be marked on. When I say what it is you're going to be marked on, your criteria does not get pulled out of the air. It gets pulled from both studies outcomes, and you're graded according to how well you meet each outcome. So having a look at those things will tell you exactly what your marking sheet will look like if you don't already have it. If you already have it, then obviously you look at the marking sheet, which again will be based on the outcome. So it goes a bit full circle there. The thing is, you need to have a look at these things, that idea, because you need to know exactly what is expected of you in your answer, and your question isn't necessarily going to indicate that. Now, if you're coming across one of those questions where it may not necessarily be asking you to write a formal traditional essay, again, this is one of those things that will really help you identify that's not exactly what it is you need to be doing. So it's very important that you have a look at this. This is the big thing, because it does three things. It first of all highlights exactly what the question is asking. It keeps your response consistent. It strengthens your argument and its relationship to the question. What I mean by identifying keywords, or using keywords for that matter, is pick some words from the question, exact words from the question, or at least a definition which is based on the question. Use it over and over, because first of all, what that will do is it will highlight what the question is asking, so what you believe the question is asking more than anything. So if it's asking how it represents something and you use that keyword as representation, then immediately you're highlighting what the question is asking. It keeps your response consistent, as in you're going to be focusing on representation and that aspect of the question, or other parts of the question that you get asked, and making sure that your response is consistently directed back towards the question. And it strengthens it, because it's not going in a different direction. It's making sure that by using those words, you're proving that your argument is related to the question. Immediately, if you've got all those three things, then what you're doing is you are not only highlighting that you understand what the question is asking, but you're making sure that everything you're writing links directly back to that. Okay, so let's go, why keywords? Well, they keep things simple. By having only a few things in mind when you're writing and planning, it helps to keep you on track. It keeps you on that straight road. You can use keywords in two ways, based on the question or based on your interpretation, which is defined in your definition. So the way you interpret the question, which in your introduction you'll state how you define the question, then you would use that keyword throughout your response in order to keep it consistent and to keep going back to that main idea. You don't want to be jumping from one idea to the next, to the next, to the next, to the next, because that's, at that point, your marker starts to get a bit lost. They help with consistency. So as you can see from that picture, this is exactly what you'd be trying to do, is trying to make sure that every point is linked to the exact same thing. While it might seem that you're repeating yourself, and it does get a little bit annoying sometimes, it makes your writing much, much easier to understand, especially if the ideas you're talking about are overly complex, or if they tend to come across as a little bit vague. You have to understand that your marker is trying to understand, just as you are, what you're trying to say. And if you interpret things or write things in different ways just to make it, give it some variety, then what you're essentially doing is you're essentially just trying to confuse someone by adding different synonyms or different words which mean the things you're trying to suggest. So while you wouldn't necessarily repeat a word 1,000 times, you would repeat it enough that your marker is able to understand what it is you're writing and be able to go through it and then be able to tick off that you have answered the question appropriately. So for instance, if I was trying to prove that a character is lonely, and then later on somewhere I say they're isolated, and I'm really trying to say that they're lonely, then really what you're doing is you're writing about something different. And that's, again, confusing, because lonely and isolated, their literal definitions are different. So to have those things together and to change halfway through and start talking about them being isolated instead, it either seems like you're trying to introduce isolated as a new idea, or you're just adding more ingredients into the pot. And really what you should be trying to do is just try and keep it to one key word, so it's much, much easier for what it is you're writing to be interpreted and understood. Ultimately, look, a lot of essays are very, very difficult to read because of the fact that students have all these great ideas, and this is the thing, you don't want to be losing your great ideas. You don't want to be losing your great answers by changing the key words that refer to them all the time. And by coming up with all these different ways of describing what it is you're trying to talk about, what you're doing is you're throwing up the possibility that your marker's not going to understand what you're trying to go on about. So it's a very important consideration. Now, if you start with a keyword, stick to it. That's the basic philosophy. If I'm writing something, or if I'm reading something, what I'm looking for is for them to continue to build on a keyword, continue to build upon an argument, without necessarily overdeveloping it, repeating it, but doing so in such a way that they're building on it, making it stronger and stronger each time. What you're doing is you're trying to strengthen your argument. By repeating a keyword, you are helping to make it stronger. Now, when I say stronger, as I said, what it is, it's being, a sense, a point of reference. So what you're doing is you are referring to it over and over again in order to drum through your marker's head that this is exactly true, that your interpretation has been done in such a way that there's no other possibility, that everything I've just talked about in that paragraph, or everything I've just talked about in this section, is referring to the question. By using a key word from the question and by connecting it to your discussion and to your evidence and everything else, you're helping to make it stronger. By using it repeatedly, as I said, you're helping to build your case continuously, keeping it consistent, which is, again, one of those factors which is helping you to strengthen your argument. You're showing how what you've related is what you've written and how you've interpreted it is related to the question and how you've developed your answer. So as I mentioned before, by the way you link it back to your discussion again, and by the way that you refer to things continuously and consistently, essentially what you're doing is you're proving that everything that you've written in your discussion, so those ideas, the evidence that you've used, the way you've understood the question, is related to the question. That it's not something that you're just writing to fill up pages. It's not something that is interpreted based on your understanding of the text and is only there to show that you know about it. It's proving that you understand what it is the question's asking, you understand exactly what it is that you're talking about, and you're referring to it in a way where you're actually showing your knowledge rather than just telling everyone the bits you can remember from the story. And this is what I mean by strengthening your argument. Make sure that when you use outcomes, that you're using it to make sure you know exactly what it is your question is trying to get you to do in terms of your actual response. And make sure you use keywords over and over again in the sense to not necessarily repeat yourself like a broken record, but to reiterate points every so often at the right times, which then are related back to the question, which are meaningful, and which help to really strengthen, support your answer and make it consistent. And that's about all there is to that. So until next time, I'll see you later.